I want to talk today about how to live skillfully. How to live skillfully. And when I thought of living skillfully, I thought of the movie Braveheart. If you're not familiar with the movie Braveheart, it was a movie that came out in the late 1900s. Okay, sorry, that didn't work as well as I thought it was going to. So a movie that came out in the late 1900s with Mel Gibson in it playing this character named William Wallace. And in this movie, William Wallace has led this revolution against England, and he's been captured and he's been taken prisoner. And the end of the movie, there's this scene where he's about to be taken to his execution, and the princess comes to him, and she's begging him basically to surrender to these people who've taken him prisoner so that he doesn't get led to his death. And he has this amazing line that he says to her in this scene at the end of the movie where he says, "Every man dies, but not every man really lives." Every man dies, but not every man really lives. And that's such a fascinating quote to me because what he's saying is that death is inevitable, but really living is optional. Death is inevitable, but really living is optional. So what does it mean to live well? What does it mean to really live? What does it mean to live skillfully? Anybody else as interested in that question as I am? When you go to your workplace or when you're hanging out with your friends or when you're just trying to figure out how to live life in the midst of the craziness of this world, how can I live life skillfully? How can I live well? That's really the question that the book of Ecclesiastes is trying to answer. Maybe this is a book that you're not as familiar with. Maybe it's not a book where you spent very much time before, depending on your familiarity with the Bible, but that's the question that it's trying to answer. And we've been in this section over the past 3 weeks in our Bibles known as the wisdom literature. And we've talked about this a lot, but we started with the book of Proverbs. Last week we talked about the book of Job. This week we're talking about Ecclesiastes, and next week Justin is preaching on the Song of Solomon, and it's just going to get so awkward, and I hope that you'll be here for it. We're talking about Song of Solomon next week, but this week we're in the book of Ecclesiastes, and here's what these books are all trying to do. They're trying to tell you from different angles, this is what it means to live skillfully. So maybe you've had this experience before where you went to go see a movie in a theater, or you went to somebody's house to watch a movie and you sat on their couch and they had surround sound, right? When you sit on somebody's couch and they've got surround sound, or you're sitting in a theater and you're hearing this surround sound around you, what's happening is the same words and the same message are coming at you from different angles, but because it's coming at you from different angles, you get a fuller, clearer sound. Right? And that's what the wisdom books are trying to do for you. They're trying to tell you from different angles, this is what it means to live skillfully. And what are they saying? Proverbs, we've said several times, many of you will never forget this, is telling you that wise people generally do better. Last week, we talked about the book of Job. Wise people aren't exempt from suffering. So what's Ecclesiastes adding to that conversation? You actually don't have to read very far into the book to find out. Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 1 says, "The words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher. Vanity of vanities, all is vanity." So there's a narrator in this book that you see in chapter 1, and then if you read through it with us this week, you'll see him come back in at the end of the story in chapter 12, and he's telling you that these words that you are about to read are the words of the preacher, or some other translations will say the teacher. I'll kind of alternate back and forth between those today, but it's this Hebrew word kohelet, and what that word means is somebody who gathers people around them, somebody who convenes people around them. And so in the book of Ecclesiastes, you have this teacher who's convened this group of people around him, maybe similar to how we're doing this today. And the teacher or the preacher in the book is teaching people what it means to live skillfully. And the very first thing that he says in this book is everything is vanity. Everything is vanity. Depending on your translation, it may say everything is meaningless or everything is futile. And they're all trying to translate this Hebrew word that is the most important Hebrew word in the book of Ecclesiastes, and it's this word hevel. Hevel. This word is used 38 times in the 12 chapters of the book of Ecclesiastes. And if you have footnotes at the bottom of your Bible, like I do, it'll tell you that this word most literally means smoke or mist or vapor. So if I was really trying to like get into the spirit of the teacher, the preacher today, I may have preached this sermon like wearing a black turtleneck and like sitting on a stool and smoking a pipe and maybe like in the form of slam poetry or something like that. I'm not going to do that today. Sounds like something the preacher might do. I don't own a pipe. So that would have been difficult, but it sounds like something the preacher might do. I will say, if at any point today you just like really resonate with something I'm saying and you want to give some snaps or something like that, that's how you can communicate back with me that you're hearing the things that I'm saying. So anyway, I don't have a pipe up here with me, but I did settle for second best. I have a candle from Target. Okay, so. This is peony and cherry blossom with notes of vanilla and berry, so super masculine scent. And so I want you to just go with me here for just a second. So if I light this candle, and then I blow it out, what you see coming out of the candle right there, that's Hevel. That's Hevel. And what the teacher is trying to tell you is that's what life is like. That's what life is like. So what's he trying to communicate? Let's do it one more time. Here's what it is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I can't see it anymore. You get that? It's short. It's here for a second, and then it's gone. It's fleeting. It's temporary. Beginning of the book, that's what life is like. There's also a little bit of nuance here. I'm going to do it one more time, okay? Stick with me. Because here's what's also true. Life is short, but here's what's also true of smoke. If I try to like reach out my hands and grab it, like there's something real there. There's substance to it. You can see it. There's something real there, but if I try to like reach out my hands and clasp it, if I try to really get a grip on it, what happens? It slips through my fingers. It leaves me empty-handed. So life is short and life is elusive. That's what, from the very beginning, the author of Ecclesiastes is trying to teach you. That's what this word hevel means. So here's what Ecclesiastes contributes to the conversation. If Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes were to walk into a bar and they were having a conversation about wisdom, here's what each of them would say. Proverbs would tell you wise people generally do better. Job would say, yes, that's true, and at the same time, wise people also aren't exempt from suffering. And Ecclesiastes would say, here's the deal, guys, everybody's going to die. Everybody's going to die. Wise, foolish, smart, it doesn't matter. Everybody's going to die. And apparently, that's supposed to teach you something about wisdom. Apparently, that realization is supposed to teach you something about how to live skillfully. What is it that it teaches you? Well, the way that the teacher figured this out was that he conducted this experiment. We're going to read about this in chapter 2, and he's trying to find something that was going to satisfy him and bring him joy and fulfillment. And through this experiment, we learned 3 things. We learned, first of all, the pursuit that we're all on. We learned the problem that we all face. And we learn the perspective that we all need. The pursuit we're all on, the problem we all face, and the perspective we all need. So first of all, pursuit we're all on. Look at chapter 2, verse 1. He says, I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. It's a good place to start, right? Enjoy yourself. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So the whole point of this pursuit is to try to figure out what is the best way for human beings to spend that short life that they have. How can you live in that short little smoke, that short little vapor of your life in a way that leads to lasting joy and satisfaction and fulfillment? And by the way, that is the question as much as any other that's still driving us all these thousands of years later. Here's what we tend to think when we think of ourselves. We tend to think of ourselves as pretty like rational, smart, intellectual people, and we tend to think that our decisions are motivated by the information that we know. So that's why we constantly need new podcasts. That's why we constantly need new books, because if I can just get the right content, if I can just get the right information, then my life will come in line with these things that I know. But here's the problem. We are not driven by information near as much as we're driven by desire. Like, you do not have to convince yourself to do the things that you think are going to lead you to joy and satisfaction. Like, if you think that something is going to lead you to joy and life and satisfaction and fulfillment, you will line up your life with that thing. We're driven by desire. And one of the first places that the teacher goes in this pursuit that he's on is alcohol. People seem like they're pretty happy when they drink alcohol, so it seems like a good place to start. But here's the thing, Ecclesiastes 2 doesn't end at verse 3. The pursuit doesn't stop, in other words, right? Teacher has to keep finding new and better things because alcohol may be able to distract you from that longing in your soul for a few hours, but it doesn't satisfy it. So he tries a different route. Look, I just want you to feel the scale of his work and his wealth here. Look at verse 4 with me. I made great works. I built houses, plural, and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I also had great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been born before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women. So listen, I'm sure some of you throw some great parties, and I'm sure some of you like curate some incredible Spotify playlists for those parties, but he was not curating Spotify playlists. He was buying the band for the party, right? He says, many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So hear this, he's got power, possessions, wealth, beauty, sex. He had it all. And these are the type of people that we look at as successful in our culture. He was an influencer in his day that lived the life that everyone wanted to live. He had fun, he worked hard, and he made some money. Look at verse 9. I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me. And whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. But here's where his pursuit got in verse 11. I considered all that my hands had done and the toil I had expended in doing it. And behold, all was vanity, all was hevel, all was smoke, vapor, and a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. It's like he gets out of bed after last night's party, and there's a girl in the bed next to him, and he walks out onto his balcony and he looks over all these gardens and parks and works that he's made with his hands, and he's just seeing all that his wealth has bought for him and all that his desire and pursuit of pleasure has done for him. And at the end of analyzing all these things that he's gotten in this pursuit, he looks down and he realizes that his hands are still empty. He looks down and realizes that all of that striving, all of that trying to get his hands around something that was going to satisfy him left him with empty hands. All his pursuit of pleasure did was lead him to problems that were even deeper than he realized. And that leads to the problem we all face, because what the teacher is recognizing is that there is a hole in his soul that's too deep for pleasure to fill. There's a hole in his soul that's too deep for pleasure to fill. Why is that? It's because pleasure always demands more pleasure. Alcohol can provide you with pleasure for a little bit, but eventually you're going to need more alcohol to provide you with that same level of pleasure. Sex can provide you with pleasure for a little bit, but eventually you're going to need more sex with more people in order to provide you with that same level of pleasure. You can get an education and you can make a lot of money and you can buy a lot of stuff, but eventually that stuff is going to get old and you're going to have to buy new and better stuff. Here's what I'm trying to say. When we face these problems in our culture, what we have the tendency to do is to look for something to optimize our lives instead of something that satisfies our souls. Maybe you're looking at this story and you're like, Ryan, I don't know if this applies to me. Like I'm hearing the teacher talk about these things, and he's talking about having houses, and I live in Austin, Texas in 2026, and I've like got a 25-year savings plan to get me on track to buy a house. This just does not feel like it actually applies to me, and I get that. Like, I'm with you, but isn't it true that our default response when we start to feel empty or lonely or upset is to run to things that we think are going to give us that brief moment of pleasure? A lot of times it may not be big public things like the teacher. Maybe for you, it's more private things. Maybe it's more socially acceptable things. But that tendency is the same tendency that we have. But pleasure always demands more pleasure. And as you keep trying to draw from these wells, you realize that the more that you run to them, the more they take from you. And that's where the teacher is at. But all of that is eclipsed by the main problem that he points out starting in verse 14. Look at this with me. Ecclesiastes 2:14. He says, the wise person has his eyes in his head. In other words, he can see straight, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceived that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. I don't know about you, this does not feel like a person that I would want to hang out with, right? He seems a little jaded and a little cynical, but the reality is he's running up against the problem that we all face. He's gone on this lifelong experiment, and the thing that he can't get past is death. The thing that he can't get past is death. The wise person dies just like the fool. The rich person dies just like the poor person. All of that stuff that you accumulate in this life, he's going to go on to say later in the book, you can read it this week if you read along with us. All the stuff you accumulate in this life is going to go to somebody who didn't work for it and probably doesn't want it anyways. No matter how much of an impact we have in this world, it's likely, he's telling us, he says there's no enduring remembrance. It's likely that in 100 years, nobody's going to remember our names. And that's a healthy dose of humility for us. Because we want to live our lives in a way where we're remembered. We want to live in a way that leaves a legacy, and that's a good thing. But it's a healthy dose of humility to realize that in 100 years, probably nobody will remember our names. Let me prove this to you. How many of you know the names of all of your great-great-grandparents? Maybe a couple? A few? It's okay if you do. That wasn't yeah, it's okay. That's good if you do. But the reality is not very many of us, right? Not very many of us know them. We don't know their names. That's why the teacher looks at his life and all the pleasure he's experienced and says, it's hevel, it's temporary, it's fleeting, it's here and then it's gone. Alcohol and wealth and work and education and pleasure, distraction, they're like bubbles that we use to protect ourselves from the realities of life, and death bursts that bubble every single time for every single person. And again, something about this is supposed to teach us how to live skillfully. Something about this is supposed to teach us wisdom, and we're going to get there. Once you hear and receive that reality, how the wise person dies just like the fool, you're ready to receive the good news. But it actually might surprise you how he gets there. Skip down to verse 24. Verse 24, he says, there's nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy. But to the sinner, he's given the business of gathering and collecting only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind. So this is the perspective that we all need. And at first, it doesn't seem like it makes sense what he's saying here, because it seems like he's saying food, drink, and work are never going to bring you the fulfillment you're looking for. And then he says, so there's nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his work. So what's happening here? What's happening is a shift in perspective for the teacher. We said earlier that dying is inevitable, but really living is optional. We could even rephrase that a little bit to get to the point of Ecclesiastes and to get to the perspective that we all need. And here it is. You won't really live until you realize that dying is inevitable. You won't really live until you realize that dying is inevitable. The way to find meaning and joy in life apparently is to recognize that life is really short, that it's fleeting. And if you're like, I'm not following, here's how it works. When you accept how frail and how fragile your life is, you can stop expecting too much from things like food and possessions and Instagram and school and alcohol and sex and fill in the blank with whatever else. You can learn to enjoy them as gifts rather than using them to be the thing that gives you the satisfaction and the joy and the fulfillment that you're looking for. How does that happen? The teacher shows us that if you want to really live, there's 3 shifts that need to happen as a part of this perspective change. And the first one is a shift from control to surrender. There's no way to enjoy the gifts that God has given you whenever you're trying to control every single outcome for your pleasure and your comfort. There's no way to enjoy those gifts, and the scriptures are constantly trying to give you that healthy dose of humility that reminds you that your efforts at control aren't actually changing that much anyways. And if you've lived very long, you figured this out. No matter how much I try to control something, no matter how much I try to grasp at it and get a hold on it, my efforts at control ultimately don't do that much anyway. So we move from control to surrender. The second shift is a shift from the future to the present. And I want you to know I love planning and preparation so much. I love organization. I love being ready for the future. These are good, godly things. But the issue for the teacher in the book of Ecclesiastes was that he was pursuing all these things only for what they might give him at some point in the future. He's pursuing all these things that we just talked about only for what they might give him at some point in the future. And I get this. When I was in college, all that I could think about was getting married and starting a job. And then when I started a job, all that I could think about was where that job might lead me in the future. And whenever we knew that we wanted to plant a church and we moved out to Lubbock, all that I could think about was getting to Austin. And when we didn't have kids, all that I could think about was having kids. And again, none of those are bad things. But when my focus is only on what's coming for me in the future, it robs me of my ability to have joy in the present. It robs me of the ability. Somebody almost snapped and they didn't do it. And that was a good opportunity to do it right there. Maybe this will do it. Listen to this quote from Blaise Pascal. This is from his book, Pinces, which I know is on the 2026 reading list for you, but just in case you don't have time to get to it, I'll give you a little Cliff Notes version of it here. He says, "The present is never our end. The past and present are our means." In other words, we use the past and the present only to get to the future. The future alone is our end, and so we never truly live, but rather hope to live. And this line right here is something that I hope sticks in your mind for this entire week. He says, "As we are always preparing to be happy, it is inevitable that we should never be so." As we're always, because happiness and joy and satisfaction and fulfillment is something that we can only see out there in the future whenever the season changes to what season I want it to be, when that is our life's attitude, we will never experience joy in the present. And God wants you to recognize right now in the present moment, there are some gifts that he's given you because he loves you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. It's too late, it's too late. The third shift is a shift from striving to receiving. From striving to receiving. Did you notice how many times in the story the teacher referenced something he did? I said, I searched, I made, I built, I bought. There's this sense of entitlement where he thinks because he's worked hard, he's earned a certain level of pleasure in his life. But something shifts in that last paragraph in verse 24 that we just read, where he begins to recognize, hold on, I've been striving really, really hard, and what I didn't realize is that this food that's in my hand right now is a gift from the hand of God. What I didn't realize was that the job that God gave me, as hard as it is, and as much as some of my coworkers drive me crazy, like I prayed for this job, and that's a gift. As hard as it is to raise kids and to have sleepless nights and to constantly be trying to think about what it looks like for me to discipline them well and to lead them and raise them up. Like, I prayed for these kids, and they're a gift. They're a gift. That's why James 1 says, "Don't be deceived, my beloved brothers. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of lights." Why does he have to say, don't be deceived? It's because it's really easy to trick yourself into thinking that you are the source of the good gifts. It's really easy to think that you and your hard work are the reason that you have what you have. And that's what striving will do to you. If the teacher is teaching you anything today, it's that striving, that grasping, that trying to control things for yourself every single time you come back with empty hands. Every single time. But here's the beauty of this whole story today. And I think this is where the teacher leads us. Is that when you realize that your hands are empty, now I'm in a perfect posture to come to Jesus. When I realize that my hands are empty, I'm in a perfect posture to come to the God who wants to give me good gifts for my joy. God's answer to the hevel, to the smoke, to the vapor of this world, to the shortness and the brevity of life is to give us good gifts in the midst of it. And because we're followers of Jesus today, we can't talk about God's good gifts without realizing that there is one good gift that surpasses all the other good gifts. And that is that the God who is, in the language of Ecclesiastes, who is beyond the sun, came to live under the sun in the midst of the chaos and confusion and death of this world. And not only that, but he would actually endure that death that we're talking about at the cross, go into the ground for 3 days and rise again to show you that he hasn't just lived in the midst of the brokenness of this world, but he's battled with it and he's overcome it. And here's what's going to happen. Because of that, one day he's going to clear away all that smoke that clouds your vision, all that smoke that keeps us from seeing him for who he really is and seeing life in the way that he created us to. One day he's going to clear away all that smoke, all that fog that comes with life in a broken world, and we're going to see him face to face and be with him forever. And we get a little glimpse of that in the life of Jesus. Get a little glimpse of that in his life. All throughout his life, he would come to people who were struggling, who were realizing the emptiness of their hands, and he would say things to them like, I am the living water. He would say things like, I am the bread of life. He would say things to them like, I have come so that you may have life and have it abundantly. What he's saying is that he is the only one who can satisfy your soul forever. He's the only one who can fill your hands with something that's actually going to satisfy. You're looking, Jesus is saying, to all these other places to try to satisfy that longing in your soul that only Jesus can satisfy. Here's what I've realized, like in a lot of conversations with people who are either exploring faith or exploring what it might mean to follow Jesus. Here's a stereotype that I just want to point out to us today. The stereotype is that people think not following Jesus is a life of pleasure and that following Jesus is a life of boredom and restriction. But can I just show you real quick some passages like from the actual Bible to tell you that that is not the way that following Jesus is meant to be? Look at what Psalm 16 says. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore in the presence of God. Psalm 63 says it a different way. It says this, because your steadfast love is better than life, my lips will praise you. My soul will be satisfied as with fat and rich food. Have you ever had that experience where you like go eat at a steakhouse or something and you bite into a piece of steak? Somebody gonna be snapping here in just a minute. You bite into that piece of steak and it's just so tender and juicy and delicious and it like melts in your mouth. David is like, that's what my experience of life with God is like. You feel that? Like, that's what my experience, like, I don't know, when people ask you at work, like, why you're a follower of Jesus, when people ask you, like, you're hanging out with friends, like, why on earth would you give your time, or what does it mean to follow Jesus? If you're just like, yeah, I go to church every so often, I read my Bible occasionally and pray, like, what? That's not the type of life that Psalm 63 says is available for you in God. A life of following Jesus and a life of living in communion with God is his steadfast love is better than life. My soul's been satisfied forever. I think some people might be drawn to that, right? I think there might be some people who want in on that. Jesus says in John 10:10, I've come that they may have life and have it to the full. Here's what the Bible is telling you. Christianity is not first and foremost about just denying your surface level desires. It's about full satisfaction for your deepest desires in Jesus. And anytime that God calls you, because Jesus does say, deny yourself, take up your cross and follow me. Anytime he does call you to say no to a surface level desire, it's because he wants full satisfaction for your deepest desires. And that's in him. So the first step towards joy and satisfaction for some of you today, I was feeling this so heavily as I was just sitting over here praying, listening to Justin talk about what it means to be lost. Like the reason that I care so much about saying these things to you is that I remember like it was yesterday, a day in my junior year of high school where the pursuit stopped. And some of you know exactly what I'm talking about. I say everything that I'm saying today from a place of compassion because I know what it's like to be on the pursuit, and I know what it's like for that pursuit to stop and for your soul to be satisfied forever. The first step for some of you today is going to be to come to Jesus with your hands empty and open and say, I give up on looking to other places to give me what only you can give. I give up on it. And what happens when you do that is that you're freed up to stop striving. You're freed up to stop the pursuit and to slow down enough in the midst of the craziness of life to recognize all the good gifts that he's given you. As you read through the gospel, something that's so beautiful to me about the life of Jesus is that he's able to hold a couple of things in tension. First of all, you notice as you read through the gospels, you notice how much Jesus talks about his own death. If you've read through the Gospels, maybe if you're on this journey through the story of the Bible with us, you'll see this here in just a little bit. He talks about his death all the time. He's constantly telling his disciples, hey, when we get to Jerusalem here in a couple weeks, I'm going to die. Hey, I know I told you last chapter, when we get to Jerusalem, I'm going to die. I just want to reiterate to you for a second time, I'm going to die. Hey, for a third time, just so you know, when we get to Jerusalem, I'm going to die. He says it over and over and over again to the point that his disciples are like, Jesus, you got to stop talking like this because you're the Messiah. You're supposed to set up your kingdom on earth. You're not supposed to die. And what he says to them is, you're right. I am the Messiah. I did come to set up my kingdom on earth, but that's going to happen through death and not apart from it. And so he comes to these places with these people. He acknowledges his own death, but at the same time, you notice that his life isn't marked by despair. It's marked by celebration. It's marked by sitting around a table with people all the time and not being in a hurry, being present with people, recognizing that the food that he's eating and the people that he's sitting across from are a gift from his Father who loves him. So he holds that tension. He knows that he's going to die. He knows that it's coming. And that leads him to recognize in the midst of all the craziness of this world and in the midst of what's coming, I'm going to live a life of celebration, not a life of despair. I'm going to live a life that's marked by presence and surrender and not by control. He's constantly, Jesus, having to tell these stories called parables to get the crusty religious people to understand that the kingdom of God is a kingdom of celebration. It's not a kingdom of despair. And it's not because he's unaware of the reality of brokenness in this world. It's because he's come face to face with it and he recognizes that God gives good gifts in the midst of it. How do you make these shifts? Here's what I want to challenge you to do today. I think this is the point, the application point for the book of Ecclesiastes. Here's what it's calling you to do, and here's how it helps you live skillfully. Live for your funeral instead of your resume. Live for your funeral instead of your resume. Let's come back to it again. I mean, you're like, you already did this one too many times. I'm gonna do it again. Let's come back to it again. That's it. That's life. Life is so short. It's here today, and it's gone tomorrow, and it's so easy to spend it trying to grasp at this thing that's not meant to satisfy your soul, at this thing that's not meant to give you the life and the joy and the fulfillment that you were created for. But here's the good news. When you come to that place, just to say it again, when you come to that place and you've been striving and you've been caught in the midst of the pursuit and you're trying to make sense out of life and trying to find something that's going to bring you joy, and you realize that your hands are empty, you're in the perfect posture to come to Jesus. Because whenever you do that, when you come to him, and he satisfies the deepest longings of your soul for a love that you can't lose, and an identity that can't be shaken, and a purpose that you can't imagine, you can start to hold whatever gifts he does give you with open hands. You can start holding those gifts that he does give you in a way that doesn't crush them. You can come to him and you can say, Jesus, I'm done living for control, and I surrender to you. I surrender to your will. I'm done living for some mythical moment in the future in my life when everything is finally going to be perfect and I'm finally going to be fulfilled. And I'm going to recognize that right now, in the midst of this crazy, hectic season that you have me in, you've given me so many good gifts. And I'm done striving to get something that you're offering me freely today as a gift. And here's the reality. I'm not going to spend my life striving after smoke. I'm going to receive his gifts with empty hands, and I'm going to hold them with open hands. And the author of Ecclesiastes is telling you, when you get that, you're on the verge of becoming a person who can live skillfully. So I want to give us a moment to respond now. I want to give you some space to bow your heads and close your eyes and just spend a moment before God. You don't get very many moments like this, and so I want to give you this opportunity. And here's what I want to invite you to do. I want to invite you, in the spirit of what we're talking about today, if you're comfortable with it, just to open your hands in front of you. There's nothing magical about this. It's just a way for us to acknowledge that our hands are empty before God, and any good thing that we have in our lives is a gift from him. This is a posture of releasing the things that we've been holding on to and receiving the things that God wants to give us. And I just want to ask you that question just before God. Are you in the middle of this pursuit right now? Whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, have you felt that emptiness that he's talking about? Is there something other than Jesus that you're holding on to, that you're banking on to satisfy you, whether it's for the first time or the second time or the 100th time? I just want to invite you today to open up your hands to him, to stop the striving, to look to him for joy and life and satisfaction. Father, I just pray for each person in this room. I pray that over these next few moments, we would open our hands to you as we sing this song together, that we would put ourselves in a posture of releasing those things that we've been holding on to. God, I pray that you would work and that you would move over these next few minutes.